Being a mentor in a prison treatment program was one of the most meaningful opportunities in my life because it taught me what I want to do and that working with other people is as satisfying for me as it is for them. So this whole program started because of drug addiction, because a guy's overdosing on heroin, because I was being out of control. So these two guys who had been struggling and trying to stop and couldn't get any came to me and said, "Look, we know you talk to mental health. Like, is there something we can do? Because anywhere on this compound I go, I can get high. If I go to the hole, I can get dope. If I'm out here, I can get dope. Like, no matter what, we just need a place where we can't get dope because we can't stop ourselves from getting it." So we went to the mental health guy and said, "Look, can we have a conversation that's off the record and that's not going to security?" He said, "Sure. Like, I'm mental health, I can keep confidentiality." And we said, "Look, there's so many drugs here. Like, these guys who are trying to get clean cannot get clean because it's always available. They always have people knocking on the door. They have to it was just a challenge." And he said, "Okay, well, let's see what we can do." So he contacted the state and said, "All right, we'd like to do a substance abuse treatment program. We'd like to have a pod set aside. We'd like for them to be away from other guys so we can make different choices." We had a bunch of discussions around it, and what the state came back with wasn't a drug treatment program, but a mental health treatment program. And they basically said, "Look, we don't have the specification, but we have all these SMI guys and these kind of unmanageable guys with mental health issues. If you guys can figure out a way to do that, like, we'll let you have your program." So they started a pilot program, and we were one of the institutions, I think they had it two other institutions, that has now expanded statewide. Every level 3 and up prison has a SAM pod. But so they kind of gave us free reign and said, "Look, we know you know what you need more than we do. Like, we can provide the services, we can provide the training, but you're in that daily space. Like, what do you need? How can we help?" So we got together a group and said, "Okay, we want to make sure we have activities, we have structure, we want to make sure we have support, and we have to have a certain amount of autonomy. Like, they have to respect the fact that we can handle issues and we can't go to them about it. Like, if we have a guy who keeps getting high and keeps bringing drugs into the prod and not giving it to other people, we have to be able to go to them and be like, 'Look, you need to remove this guy. We can't tell you why, but you need to remove him.' Because we get into the point where we're talking about what people are doing, if we're snitching, nobody's ever going to respect us. But as long as we can keep that anonymity, as long as we can keep that confidentiality, and they'll respect what we're saying because we're saying it from an intentional place, then we can keep the program running." And that was how it worked. We had issues, we had guys fighting. I remember we had one guy, he just kept picking fights with everybody else. We finally went to him and we're like, "Look, this guy's really unmanageable, like, we just can't have him in here." And they said, "Oh, well, you gotta tell us, like, what did he do?" And I said, "Look, we made a deal. The deal is we have to be able to come to you and let you know that when there's a problem, and you have to be able to handle that problem. We're not asking you to lock somebody up, we're not asking you to do anything crazy. We just need him to not be in here because this is working counter to our goals." And they did. They were like, "All right, cool." So they moved him out. And we actually had this place where the prisoners trusted us and could come to us and be like, "Man, I keep cutting myself, but I don't know what to do." Now, we had to report acts of self-harm to mental health because that was a whole health issue. But the whole thing was they wouldn't take that to security. And that was what we needed. We needed to be able to go, "Look, man, if you keep hurting yourself, like, we need to figure out something to do. If you're feeling bad," because this isn't even just about a rule. Like, I don't want people to die. Like, I don't want people to lose their lives. One of our priorities was to make sure people had a safe space to talk about suicidal thoughts or self-harm thoughts, because that wasn't allowed in prison. If you say that in front of anybody in security, they're going to go stick you on strip cell. So they're going to take you, stick you in a cell, take all your clothes, all your property. You're going to have this like weird cloth Velcro thing that you kind of put over. It's almost like a mini skirt, and you have to wear that, and that's it. No blanket, no sheet, no anything, whether it's cold. Like, you're just miserable. So when you're at your most desperate state and you need help the most, they put you in a literally torturous position. But our way was to be there, to have support, to be willing to talk to you. And when we knew we needed help, like especially if there was self-harm or suicidal ideation, we'd go to the staff and be like, "Look, man, we need to talk to you. Like, we're really worried about this guy. Can you pull him out? Can you come talk to him? What can we do?" So we developed this relationship that was symbiotic, where we were able to provide peer support. And this taught us about our ability. Like, we didn't necessarily know as individuals the impact we could have. We'd all, I think probably all of the mentors at that point, had mentored or tutored or done something on a small scale, but to realize that we could create a position where people knew they could come to us and knew they could trust us and knew they could bring whatever was going on to them. Be like, "Yo, dude's got a knife, man, I'm scared, I gotta figure out something to do." And we could go and be like, "Look, dude, here's the deal. Like, you give up the knife or you get out. Like, that's it. You can't live in here. You can't be in a position where you're threatening other people. This is about healing. Like, if you want to go live that life, go back out on the yard. Like, do whatever you're doing, but don't come over here where we're trying to do things differently." And 9 times out of 10, they would. We had a couple guys we had to go to him and be like, "Look, man, you got to remove this guy. Like, he's wilding out. Like, we need him gone." But for the most part, people got with the program. What we saw was, as there was a culture of healing and as there was a culture of honesty and accountability, there was a different, like, inclusion. Like, people who never would have gone to a group, people who never would have participated before, all of a sudden were participating and we're opening up and we're talking about their past. So that peer support models group that wasn't like arbitrarily, put down from above or from, the administration, but was built up by us because we knew what was needed. We knew what we could do for each other, was one of the most amazing things we've ever done. And it taught me how good it feels to work with other people and how much that's a passion of mine and how eventually I want to go to grad school. I want to figure out how to get past the felony background and get licensed as a counselor, as a social worker. I want to be in a position to share my experience, both lived experience and clinical experience, in the hopes that other people can find the freedoms and the joys and the experiences that I found. Because the only reason I am where I am is because people helped me along the way. So when I thought about this program, I thought about two mentors that I had. So I had this old man named Carl, and I had this young guy named Danny. And they couldn't have been more different, but they shaped who I was as a person. So I met Carl when he kind of pulled me out, and he was like, look, dude, you spend all day with your nose in a book, like you're really good, like I'm glad you're learning. He said, one day you're gonna wake up and realize life is about people. And then you can't like think or learn your way out of the situation. You have to learn to deal with people. Like you have to learn the value of human interaction. And it kind of shocked me because nobody had said anything. Nobody had like addressed the fact that all I did was work out and keep my nose in a book. And it made me realize like I need to learn about people. I need to learn about myself. I need to get a better understanding. And he and I talked sometimes for hours every day. Even when he moved to another pod, like we were able to go out to rec together because our two pods rec together. And we would go out on the fence and we would talk and we would give each other homework and we would write essays and we would go back and forth with different ideas. And it was amazing because I started to see that possibility in myself. And that was when I realized that programs need to be about empowerment. That if we have a mental health treatment program, it needs to address the needs of the people in there and then hopefully work towards empowering them to be mentors or empowering them to be examples to other people. Because there's no better approach for the guy who's the problem guy, who won't get with the program, who won't do anything else, than to give him a position where he's responsible for something. And then he suddenly has something to feel good about. He suddenly feels like he's contributing rather than taking. And all of a sudden he starts kind of shaping up and he starts getting with the program. But instead we yell at him and say, you're bad, and until you get good, we're never gonna let you. It doesn't work. Like we have to show people. We have to sometimes model healthy behavior from the outside, and sometimes we have to show people their own potential. And Danny was another one. I moved in to cell with the guy Danny after this crazy situation. I move in there and there's this like little homeless kid. I mean, he literally was homeless before he got in. Like he chose not to live in a house. He chose to just be out on the streets, kind of live this wild life. He's got a bunch of bad tattoos. And instead, he's like one of the wisest people I know. Like he introduces me to mindfulness meditation. He introduces me back to martial arts. We have these discussions, these amazing academic things. I'm reading all these books and he's read all of them. Like he has studied life in a way that I'd never met anybody. So I learned this stuff. And I was like, okay, these people have shaped my life and in ways that I never expected, simply by being the people that they were and by sharing that knowledge freely with others and kind of sharing that wisdom. So that when we designed a peer support program, I wanted it to be that. I wanted all of us who were in a mentor position to be living as healthy a life as possible. It doesn't mean we're perfectly clean or perfect or whatever, but we're living as healthy a life possible so we can model that healthy behavior. But then also we have specific things we know how to teach. I could teach a yoga class. I could teach a nonviolent communication class. We could teach elements of DBT. We taught things that allowed people to basically have different tools in their toolkit, process things in a different way, and essentially live in a different way because like a lot of people have never been exposed to that. And we say, oh, well, we're gonna make prison as bad as possible so nobody wants to go back there. Well, that's great in theory, right? Like if somebody made a conscious choice to go to prison and then they get out, they're gonna try to make a conscious choice not. But a lot of people go because of economic reasons, because they don't have the emotional maturity, because they don't know how to deal with things, because of addiction. So we don't get them tools to deal with those underlying issues. Making it terrible isn't gonna keep them out of prison. It's just gonna make them more likely to try to shoot at a cop to not go back or something horrible. Whereas we give people skills and you show them their own potential, they're much less likely to go to prison because they see this whole world in front of them. They see all of these opportunities where previously they'd only seen limitations.